and Roll High School.
Roger Corman had started New World Pictures, and he was looking for directors to do movies for New World.
Allan Arkush was working for me as an editor and second unit director, and I thought he'd be good to direct it.
I thought of the movie while I was in high school. I would sit in class and I'd daydream and stare out the window and think of things like motorcycle races in the hallways and how I would get back at the women who served the hot lunch. And I started inventing this scenario in my head that my favorite rock band was going to come to the high school and play a concert for me. And I imagined the concert.
Allan worked at Fillmore East in New York. I mean, he grew up in this. He grew up. He was kind of like a male version of P.J. Soles.
This is rock and roll high school.
When the disco craze hit, I had an idea for a film to be called Disco High, in which the students, of course, are rebelling against the stern principal who hates disco music, and they love disco music, and it ends up with them blowing up the high school.
We never let anyone know it was called Disco High.
We hated disco.
It was on the title page that Roger got, but every time we sent the script to a band or anyone we knew, we changed the title page to Rock and Roll High School.
Oh, because Jiminy Christmas, Disco High.
And Allan strenuously objected to doing a disco picture.
Disco High, Disco High. I could only imagine the nightmare.
And one day he came to me and he said, Roger, you can't blow up a high school with disco music.
You had to blow up a high school to music which had inherent violence. And that's where the Fillmore East experience came in, because I saw The Who many times destroy their amplifiers. And I got up on Roger's couch and I did Pete Townshend's Arm Swings, and I basically sang My Generation and showed him how you smashed a guitar, and that feeling was what rock and roll was about.
I said, you're right, Allan, we'll go with your titles. That's one of the few times I've switched my title.
And I say to you parents, this high school is a failure.
In forming the visual style for Rock and Roll High School, I had to show Roger what I meant. And luckily, there was a concert at Hollywood High School that I went to. And the headliner was Elvis Costello. And it's a famous concert because Elvis has released a couple of the tracks on live albums. And I took photos of the concert, and I took photos of the outside of the school and the crowd and brought them into Roger and showed him what I was talking about and what the kids will look like in the movie. And it gave him confidence that I had a real strong point of view. Because one of the things you learn with Roger is that if you seem to know what you want, he will go along with it. And unlike almost everybody else I've ever worked with, in the sense of being someone who runs a studio, he is a filmmaker first. Mike Fennell, God bless him, had written up this big budget, a chart, saying, you know, this movie would cost $185,000 to make this movie. And so we presented this thing to Roger, and he said, $185,000? I never dreamed of spending so much money. So now we're begging for the figure that we couldn't do it for in the first place. Well, the movie ended up costing $300,000.
Without the Ramones, what kind of movie would it have been? It would have been a totally different kind of movie.
We went to Warner Brothers, and we're meeting with one of the vice presidents of Warner Brothers, and we start talking about bands, and they realized that I really knew music.
You go to his house, and he has like racks of tapes then, not CDs, tapes. He knew all about punk.
So they showed me a video of a brand new band, which they said was a little weird, but they're visual, and that was Devo. But we felt that Devo, just at the moment, had too much of their own thing going on. Then they talked about another band that were really wild, and they might work, but if you can control them. And they had an album coming up, and that was Van Halen. And somewhere along the way, someone in the room said, do you know this band from New York called the Ramones? And I said, yeah, I know the Ramones. That would be funny to see Joey Ramone be someone who was worshipped as a rock idol. And I got a copy of John Holstrom's Punk magazine, and I showed it to Roger, and he said, oh, this is definitely our band.
It was, I guess, an honor to be approached by that whole team, by the whole Roger Corman production company.
And they were delighted to be in the picture, and we worked out a reasonable amount of money.
It was $25,000 all in, and that included all the music for the movie. That's how the Ramones got in the movie.
I think we were all a little intimidated on how the Ramones were going to be because it was rock and roll. I mean, and they were the Ramones. They were a punk act. They were the real deal.
I wish I could say that I was a genius and thought they were going to be one of the most important bands of all time, but it was strictly a gut reaction on my own to how much I loved their music.
We had an idea of the way movies were made, and we were always movie buffs, me and John.
John is also a major film buff, and we used to talk about horror movies and collecting and movies, and he was a VHS collector before I knew anyone who did that.
Rock, 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 rock.
And he held that band together, and he had the drive that you don't see that much in rock and roll bands. I mean, when you walked into Ramone's dressing room, they were rehearsing before the show, whereas most bands, you go in there and they're getting drunk. Mark is just a fabulous drummer. I mean, Marky Ramone drove that band so hard, and his drum playing and his cymbal work, it's just really one of the classic rock drummers.
Things sure have changed since we got kicked out of high school.
Joey and I had a similar point of view on the world, and so I always hung out with Joey. And he had 2 apartments in one building on one floor, and when one would get dirty, he'd move into the other and get that one cleaned. Dee Dee was kind of always an enigma to me because he was just kind of a funny guy.
I just thought that they were the oddest creatures I'd ever seen when I first saw them.
Rock and roll high school. Hey, pizza, great, let's dig in.
And then I got to talk to them, and they were very shy and sweet.
Directing the Ramones was more a matter of getting them to the set, explaining what was going on, trying to get Dee Dee to remember his lines, and getting it done quickly.
Well, we knew that he knew better.
God rest their souls, but Johnny and Joey could not act their way out of a paper bag.
Why, this sure is rock and roll high school. Yeah, we liked it so much we're gonna play it on our next album.
There's a certain lack of polish to their acting chops that makes them so much more interesting on screen than most of these, contemporary rock guys.
They were really good sports. I mean, some of that stuff they thought was really unbearably corny. They hated when the guitars had to cross in the hallway. They just thought that was terrible. But on the other hand, John gave us the idea of putting the Kick Me sign on the back of, I think, Miss Togar, and they all agreed that they loved the line.
Do your parents know that you're Ramone?
Which is my favorite line in the movie.
Well, my big line in the movie was,
That was a good one, Mr. McGree.
funniest part of the movie to me was when we approached the front of the movie theater with Rodney Bingenheimer driving in the four-door Caddy convertible. Kids online with red hair, green hair, punks, and all the chains and the belts, and people driving by going, what the heck is this, There I am hitting my drumsticks and trying to dance. And in hindsight, looking at that scene, it's pretty weird. And, we looked like aliens just landing.
I didn't relate to the whole rock and roll thing at all. I didn't understand it. The first time I heard the Ramones music was at the concert that we filmed, and I was deaf, at the end of it. So I was perfect for that part because I couldn't get into it. So I was like Miss Togar's, perfect lieutenant to be fighting the rock and roll people. But then after the movie was over, I bought the soundtrack album and I listened. I went, this is great. I wish I could have heard it, during the concert.
The Ramones and their careers as kind of the granddaddies of punk rock makes the movie, special and gave the movie a signature that we probably wouldn't be talking about it if it was any other band but the Ramones.
They gave us a chance, and I will always be grateful, and I'm sure the other 3, Johnny, Joey, and Dee Dee would have been too. I miss them, and anything I can do to keep their memories alive, I will. They were like brothers to me.
Hey, ho, let's go! Hey, ho, let's go!
We read a lot of people for Rock and Roll High School, and including Daryl Hannah came in and read. I think it was the first audition she had ever been on. And we loved PJ when she came in and read, and we went to see Halloween on Hollywood Boulevard. I think it was a sneak preview, and she was great in it. And she was funny, and she also said she'll supply her own clothes. And that's what sealed the deal, because we couldn't afford a salary if she didn't supply her own clothes.
But PJ just had a quality that made you want to watch her. And she's bouncy beyond belief. I mean, the word perky is now defined, you know.
PJ Soles is a wonderful actress.
Cherish this moment forever.
She did a lot of great work. I'm a little puzzled that she didn't have, you know, a little stronger ingenue career.
The new principal of Vince Lombardi High, Miss Evelyn Togar.
This incident is going down on your permanent record.
Mary Woronov was always going to be the school principal.
In Rock and Roll High School, I was dressed as an older woman and not good looking. And so that's attractive. I know that that's attractive because it's like two opposites.
She was very good with comedy, and when she wasn't trying to be funny, a rather stern, imposing person.
That kind of Nazi, you know, principal.
She's obviously really cold, but she really wants to get laid.
She comes into the room, and there's just authority about her. There's just a total authority about this woman. You need to look at her, you need to listen to her, and you need to do what she says.
I think that should teach them a lesson in deportment. How do you spell that? D-E, portment.
Mary has a great sense of humor, very dry, kind of cynical sense of humor that I think comes out with Miss Togar. You can see her little facial expressions that come out in this role that I think are definitely Mary.
Mary Woronov's hair and makeup were done by Gigi Williams, so whatever they came up with was great.
It was wild. I mean, I knew what it came from. It's sort of like, you know, a bad 50s hairstyle for an older woman. Like with Warhol, it was gender slip, and I was a very good-looking girl, and I acted like a man.
I love talking to Mary about Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground because she was a whip dancer for them in those days. She is the exact opposite of Miss Togar.
I'm a camp actress. It's very, that's what you do.
What is your name?
Kate Rambeau.
And Dey Young was the last person to come in and read.
Tom? Why would he call me here?
The person who had the part had to do one day on another movie to finish up her work, and we couldn't afford to lose her, so they ended up with the part.
Detention center. I've never served a detention before.
She was very different than what I was in high school. I was a little rebel, and I looked like I was this straight girl, but I was really more of a rebel, like Riff.
Nice work, Rambo. I knew you could do it.
You know, the interesting thing is I'm really athletic, so not playing athletic was, I mean, I was a real tomboy growing up. I was on all the athletic teams and everything like that, so that really wasn't that challenging for me, but I had to make it look like, oh my God, I'm about, you know, and I'm afraid of heights and all of that, and I'm stuck. But to tell you the truth, it wasn't a painful thing for me, except for I had to act like it was.
Kate, yeah, come on in.
Hello, Mr. Hickelbauer.
The name Eaglebauer comes from a Lubitsch movie, and the part was written for a comic actor named Eddie Deason. And we contacted Eddie Deason's manager, and he said, well, Eddie can't do this movie. I mean, he's got 1941 coming out. And so I said, Eddie, this movie will be out and gone before 1941 is finished shooting. And we didn't get Eddie Deason. And Clint, I knew from working on Grand Theft Auto.
So when Allan got an opportunity to make Rock and Roll High School, he called me and said, hey, would you like to play this character, Eaglebauer? And I read the script, and, you know, it was exactly what I was looking for.
I would say if there's anybody who's exactly the same guy that he was then, it would be Clint.
It was one of the first jobs I did where I was on my own as an actor. You know, as a child actor, my dad was always with me. I mean, slowly he let me travel from the nest. But Rock and Roll High School was one of the first films where, you know, I was driving to the set by myself, and I was on my own, and it was rock and roll, baby.
Look at this. Fake IDs down 50%. Test answers down 60%. Hall passes are falling off the board.
You know, I'm a character actor. And Eaglebauer was very much, you know, a character. Very much kind of a foreshadowing of future kind of Clint Howard quirky character roles.
Listen, I'm just lying here in my new van, you know, my beautiful...
For some odd reason, I remember the dialogue from the movie, like, too well.
To the right place.
Eaglebauer Enterprises is a name that stands for quality. And I don't know why it was. Maybe it was the atmosphere. Maybe it was because I was out on my own for the first time and I felt like I really needed to learn the material. But I got it. I sure got the etched into my brain.
Allan would say, get the Fritzes. We need the Fritzes in here. First of all, people don't know who I am because I look totally different than in the movie. But once I say I was one of the hall monitors, they go, body search!
Body search! Body search!
You know, there are two of them. It's Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and they got giggly when I wanted them to. They were very instinctive and very good. And they're hard parts because they're sidekicks.
I think the funniest gag for me was after we come back into the school, we wind up in the clothes hamper, and they push us out the window, and we go flying out the window, and then the next time you see us, we're all bandaged up. You know, he's in the bed and his leg is up, and I'm on crutches and my arm's in a sling. I always thought that was a pretty funny visual.
We don't let any more mice in here. They've been exploding all over the place. Oh, you got headphones.
Mouse is the great Rob Bottin, who is a fabulous effects man, and that was one of the first costumes he ever made. And yes, he's in the Mouse, and he suffered greatly during the sequences at the Roxy. During those live sequences, they took a shot at the Mouse, you know. That's also Rob playing the mother. So he had a big range. I mean, he isn't just a mouse in an apron. He really embodied Mrs. Mouse. You know. And I love the little thing, I hate mousework. It was that kind of shameless humor, where if there was room in the frame for a joke, we found it.
I'm Hep Daddy-O. I'm into the Ramones. And Joey kept calling the teacher Mr. McGloop. It's Mr. McGree.
Hey, you, Mr. McGloop, a visit.
And he kept saying, Mr. McGloop, Mr. McGloop. So they left it in.
I think some of the biggest laughs are with Paul. Like, I remember one where Miss Togar comes in and his concert tickets are showing.
Who else has tickets to this concert?
Just us.
He slips it down in his pocket. Very, very subtle, very funny.
Paul Bartel, who's passed away since the making of Rock and Roll High School, was a wonderful person.
I think Paul Bartel brought a kind of quiet, ironic humor.
His Mr. McGree, the music teacher, and when he tears the sleeves off his shirt and exposes Ramones t-shirt, you know, I love Paul, and he was a great guy. I wish him well in rock and roll heaven.
And this is what we think of the Ramones.
Rock and Roll High School was in heavy rotation on MTV for a long time, except they cut out the best scene, which is the scene in her bedroom where she's smoking and sees the guys in her bedroom. And it's a terrific scene, and it was always gone from MTV because they had a no drugs policy.
So in I Want You Around, I had to find a place for all four Ramones. And all I could think of was to put Marky out the window.
I guess for creativity. You know, let's stick Marky in the backyard. That might look interesting, which it did.
The actual shooting of that is an homage, and it's almost a shot-by-shot recreation of that sequence from Frank Tashlin's The Girl Can't Help It.
The place, Lover's Lane.
I love the scene where Ego Bauer's kind of teaching us how to kiss and how to do the little moves, you know, and me kind of flashing Vince Van Patten, you know, my chest.
I might have snapped a bra or two in my life, but I was, at that point, was never really, I wouldn't consider myself a pro.
One-handed approach to strap unfastening
It's a basic skill that must be mastered. Now watch closely as I demonstrate.
There's the hook.
Every one of those bras, they were all breakaways. So I could look fast, and of course, sound effects, you know, you bring in the sound effect of the hook and the snap and the button, and the illusion is, oh man, he's really doing it. My fingers aren't that fast.
Vince Lombardi High is your school, Miss Togar.
The blowing up of the high school, I think, is what Roger noticed in the script and in the outline, that thing that was most important to him, that sense of high school rebellion.
I mean, that was actually a pretty ballsy move for this kind of a picture.
Kaboom, kaboom.
Well, when we were planning to do the explosion, we actually spent a lot of time talking with Jack Rabin, who did visual effects for Roger in a lot of great science fiction movies like Rocket Ship XM.
And everybody was saying, you know, beware.
And he was this old guy that really liked to blow up.
He looked absolutely mad.
And he used way too much explosives and stuff. We got a good kaboom.
Loud, it was hot.
Everything caught fire, went up, and scared the high school students so much they didn't show up for the second half, which was the burning of the school.
I have a little talk I give first-time directors, and I gave that talk to Allan before shooting, and he was sitting there and he was taking notes, he was listening to everything I said, and at the end I said, and Allan, be sure you have a chair with your name on it. It is more tiring work than you think. You will be exhausted. And I could see he took no note on that, and I could see he just brushed that one off.
I showed up on the set on the next to the last day and could barely stand up and was green.
Indeed, He was so exhausted with one day to go that he had to go to the hospital.
I was dehydrated, exhausted. I had a heart palpitation. It was awful, and thank God Joe Dante stepped in.
I just got a call in the morning from the producer, and he said, Allan can't come to work. Can you come in and fill in? So I came and filled in.
What are you doing, Rev? Gym class called on account of boredom.
The big day was supposed to be the gym scene where PJ was going to do her big number, and Dean Cundy was the DP. And with Allan out of commission, Dean brought over Allan's sort of plan. Allan used to draw these sort of football play kind of things to show where everything was going to happen, except they were really only decipherable to him. So Dean and I really couldn't figure it out at all. We basically decided to do it in a sort of Richard Lester style where it's just pieces. We shot all the pieces separately and then cut them together in a sort of a music video kind of a way. And it, for a salvage job, it was pretty good.
It was really fun. It was beautifully choreographed. It was just movement, and the energy was all there, and it was great, with the exception that Allan wasn't there with us.
But I got better. And I kind of, in a way, I think Roger felt a little bad for me. He didn't give me many notes on the rough cut. It's really nice that the message of the Ramones and the feeling that they give when you watch them is sort of tied up with the movie.
Being in the right place and right time is very important, and I think that visually, not just a video, but a movie with including the Ramones definitely helped our careers over time, yeah.
The movie is, first of all, it's a time capsule. Second of all, even in its time, it's a very fun, spirited movie that is never boring.
Rock and roll is rebellion with a smile on your face. And that's what Allan delivered with Rock and Roll High School.
I mean, Rock and Roll High School has affected a lot of people, and that has been really rewarding to me.
Everywhere I go, Ramones fans, people see it on TV, and that's why I think there's a whole new generation that likes the Ramones.
There's not a lot of places to go to see the Ramones doing the kind of stuff they do in this picture, because they didn't make any other movies like this. I mean, this is it. This is the Ramones' filmic legacy other than documentaries. So for that reason alone, I mean, it's a movie to be cherished because it's all we've got.
I think it just continues to have, build a following, and it's a little cult classic.
I question the use of the word cult because very often they're just saying the film didn't do very well and they're trying to pretend that it has something that it doesn't. But this indeed was a cult film. It was a success right from the beginning, but then I could equate it a little bit to a picture I had directed many years earlier, The Little Shop of Horrors. It just played and played and played, particularly on college campuses, midnight screenings, and I would say they deserve the words cult film.
I just want to thank Roger for seeing what I did, thinking I had talent, giving me the $85 to make a feature, and giving me the money and believing in Rock and Roll High School, and now the re-release. And I just think you're one of the most important producers in Hollywood history, and I know I speak for everyone from the Corman class of the 70s when I say that. Thanks, Roger.
Hello, I'm Leonard Maltin, and I'm here with Roger Corman discussing his illustrious career. And right now we're going to discuss one of my favorite of all your films, which is Rock and Roll High School. I'm very fond of this movie. Are you?
Yes, Rock and Roll High School is one of my favorites also. It's a hip, funny picture with great music by the Ramones.
I'm trying to think, did you ever make any other musicals?
I've done a couple of semi-musicals. I remember when rock and roll music was first coming up, I did a picture called Rock All Night.
That's right.
And I think a couple of others. But this was an example of where one of my employees did what I tell them to do, which is when I'm wrong, say, Roger, you are wrong. I called in Allan Arkush, and I mentioned Rock All Night had been a big success for me in the early days of rock and roll. And disco was very hot at that time. And I said, Allan, I want to do a fast, funny, hip picture called Disco High. And Allan said, Roger, it can't be hip if it's disco. It's got to be rock and roll high school. And I said, Allan, you are of an age to know that. I am not. We will make rock and roll high school.
And I think you made a wise choice there, if I may say. Although Disco High might have had its own audience, you never know.
It's a brief moment.
That's right. What is it about this film that you think makes it work so well? It's unlikely ingredients coming together.
It's the anarchy of the film. The fact that it is so wild, and the fact that the students act out every teenager's ultimate dream. They take over the high school and finally they blow it up in the last scene.
Was that a subject of some controversy during the script phase?
It was of no controversy to us. We said right from the beginning, this is a great idea. My only statement was, how much will the miniature cost to blow up the high school? When it went into theaters, we did get a few comments that this was not the best moral message to give out to young America.
Fortunately, I don't know of any reports of anyone taking it that seriously. And of course, there's a fascinating cast in this movie because there's a lot of talented people. P.J. Soles is a wonderful, wonderful lead for this film.
P.J. was great in it. She was like the film itself. She was fast, funny, she was good looking. I don't know if the film was good looking, but she really was wonderful in the film. And Allan Arkush directed that. I think that was Allan's first film. He had co-directed something with Joe Dante.
Yes, for solo credit, I believe.
Yes, and he did a great job working with P.J. and with the Ramones.
And then there's Paul Bartel and Mary Woronov in, I think, her greatest role.
Yes, Mary was Miss Togar,
Miss Togar, yes.
The evil principal of the school.
A name you can't easily forget.
Right.
It's been years since I saw it the first time, and that name has always rung in my mind. Do you have a favorite scene? I love the paper airplane. The paper airplane has always appealed to me.
I like the paper airplane scene. There are a couple of scenes with some hall guards that I don't even remember that were very, very funny. And then, of course, the huge climax where everything goes wrong at the school.
People talk about remakes and sequels, and you did do Rock and Roll High forever, many, many years later. But have you found in your experience that you can't capture lightning in a bottle? Can you make magic happen twice?
Sometimes you can, as when Ron Howard did Grand Theft Auto, he did just as good a picture as Eat My Dust. However, we had some of the same ingredients, the same director, a number of things. When we did Rock and Roll High Forever, it was a good film, but it didn't come together with the energy of the original Rock and Roll High School, and that was an example of trying our best to equal a previous success and not quite being able to do it.
Sometimes it's a chemistry that isn't formulaic, is it?
Yes, that's true. I'm a believer in the spirit on the set. If it's a comedy and I walk on the set and I see everybody kind of standing around working hard and not saying anything, I figure this isn't going to be a very funny picture. But if the crew is laughing and telling jokes and the director and the cameraman and the actor and everybody's laughing, I think that spirit comes over onto the picture.
Well, this is certainly a film with spirit.
Yes.
Spirit to spare, I would say.
Right.